All right, we're live again. Take two because I forgot to record on the first try. So, welcome everyone to the Conscious Creative Tribe podcast, episode number 6. I'm your host, Stevie P, aka Steven Parado, aka a lot of other stuff. And today I have with me LaMothe. Dre's a friend of mine. We met through Shakti Flow Yoga. So I had Nicole on, who's the teacher of that. I had Chris on, who actually brought me there. So you're the third Shakti Flow community member.
I'm so honored. And those names, I mean, Nicole Mantia and Chris Berglund, they're legendary. I just feel so honored to be amongst those names, truly.
So let's get this started by just talking about your journey, your spiritual, to use that term, your spiritual journey, the highs, the lows, the highlights, all that kind of stuff. So let's get into that.
Cool. Well, again, thank you so much for having me on here. I truly am honored. And yeah, it's been a really amazing, reflective exercise after you asked me to be on your podcast, kind of over the past couple days, thinking about my spiritual journey, because I don't think often we do take the time to really look at things in a wide angle view and
Yeah, like
kind
a
of
big picture view of your own
big
life.
picture. And sometimes it's so easy to get so narrowed in on the day-to-day stuff and to not see the bigger picture. So in terms of my spiritual journey, honestly, it was kind of forced on me as a little kid. And so my mom ended up going through her spiritual awakening when I was in middle school, like around that age. So like 12, 13, she started getting into like the Celestine prophecy and, you know, Barbara Brennan and Dolores Cannon and like all these different spiritual and metaphysical people, Greg Braden, Deepak Chopra. I mean, like, you know, all the names. And you know, at that age, I was doing what normal middle schoolers do, and but it was just really interesting because my mom kind of started out by reading a lot, but then she went into aromatherapy, clinical aromatherapy, started learning about the plant realms through essential oils, and then also started her Reiki training. And so, yeah, it was a really interesting path for her. And the only reason why I mention it as my spiritual journey was because it kind of was I had exposure to a lot of practices that I don't feel like a lot of people have exposure to till later on in life, or also like um, a lot of people like in this, you know, we talk about old paradigm versus new paradigm. It's like a lot of people are just starting to have exposure to a lot of spiritual, metaphysical thinking. So anyways, we were having a lot of interesting people like over at our house. My mom would do these things called Reiki shares, where she'd invite friends over, because after you get your Reiki training, you kind of, and you become a teacher, you want to offer to your community of students kind of a way for everybody to practice together. And, you know, in the beginning, you might not always have money to rent space or something, so you have it at your home. So yeah, monthly she would have kind of a collection of pretty awesome characters over at our home, and they would do what was called a Reiki share. So they would all kind of get together, and she would have 2 massage tables, and you know, one person would be on the table, and then everybody would kind of do Reiki on that one person on the table, which I guess like it sounds really kind of out there, but and I guess it kind of was at the time, but also really amazing, like just to have a gathering of women, like mostly women, just like a really supportive community. They would all bring food and like chit chat and you know, and then they would go into the room and they would do it. And it was interesting because at that time in my life, you know, I was a young kid, and I would like have all my homework to do or whatever, or I'd have, you know, be doing whatever. And I'd come out of my bedroom and there was literally like a wall of just like warm energy. So palpable, like crazy palpable. Um, and, some people would say, like, oh, it's like body heat, like having that many people kind of in your home. Like, it's body heat or whatever. But being a 12-year-old, not really knowing anything about any of it on an intellectual level, but just really like feeling through that experience, it was real. I knew that Reiki was real. I knew that, universal life force energy was coming through my home. Like I had an understanding of that because I was living that experience. So, and I would get invited every once in a while, like all my mom's friends loved me, so they'd have me like go on the table um and those experiences were incredible. Just like, you don't really have words for it. I don't know how many of your listeners have had energy healing done before. But it's an incredible experience that usually is just really hard to put into words, but can be just feel so real. Like, people who get massage done or who get other kinds of therapies done. Acupuncture maybe is like another example of something that can feel really palpable, but like you don't quite understand your body's energetic system, and like how could something like this feel so real, and feel so physical. And so I wouldn't say an understanding, but kind of like an experience of like, okay, this is really powerful. And so yeah, but again, besides like those experiences, in terms of taking all of this in kind of and adopting these practices myself, I didn't do that until later on. And like I was talking to you earlier, it's like these practices, it's like I kind of went about my life knowing about Reiki, loving it, whatever, but never really investing a lot of myself into it. It's kind of like the shoemaker, or not, that's not the right analogy, but like it's like taking for granted, like taking for granted, like
the
what
shoemaker's kid doesn't have shoes.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
But more so just alluding to the fact that like I took it for granted because it was accessible to me so much.
It's like, yeah, that'll always be there.
It'll always be there. And like, my mom was just is the quintessential like mother. Like she's just providing that nurturing. And that was a way that she provided that nurturing to me. And so it was kind of outside of myself. Like, so she was such a nurturer and was so good at providing that kind of outside of me that it didn't happen till later. And naturally, I think as you get older, you start self-care and you start different methods of self-care.
Yeah. You start developing yourself as an individual and like getting in touch with your authenticity too.
Yeah, so I consider myself lucky that I had exposure to a lot of these things, but I didn't like adopt them until later on, really. So yeah, so fast forward, obviously like high school, college. In college, I did I majored in like communications and public affairs, and I kind of developed a bit of like an anxiety and kind of like a depression issue in college, but was really high achieving and like really really very much like a go-getter and like an academic person, and was always really really good at like at school. Like I was really good at school. But I just kept noticing, I think because of my early exposure to spirituality, it's almost like I could always see behind the curtain ever since I was like a very young kid. And so when I went to college, especially, like I went to Syracuse University, amazing school, really, really eye-opening though, because I was just met with I was questioning everything. It's like everything I was being taught, not as much in high school, but everything in college, like I just noticed myself questioning absolutely everything. Like going to communication school, Newhouse, the School of Communications there, is like one of the best communications programs in the country. And I kind of was an intra-university transfer. So when I was like a sophomore, I transferred into that college, and didn't so the only reason why I mentioned that is because I didn't really understand the prestige of that school, where like a lot of people who went in freshman year like had been chosen over, like, so there was this prestige where I didn't really know that and just kind of went in, kind of felt like an outsider a little bit, and I just became so fascinated with like media criticism, whereas like a lot of my friends and my peers were kind of like doing, you know, they wanted to work in Hollywood, they wanted to work in New York, and they just wanted to kind of like, they wanted to be transformed into like, a professional that could work really well in that industry. Whereas for me, like I was very much more idealistic and like, came from um, kind of like policy studies, like I want to change the world, I want to do documentary filmmaking and all of these things. So it was just really interesting being a student there, and honestly just being very skeptical and questioning everything. And I really think that is an important part of my story, because it really painted, even to this day, that was like 10 years ago now. I graduated in 2010. So it was 10 years ago since I started in that school. And it really has painted my spiritual path, has painted kind of my professional path, because back then it was like I really didn't feel like I could that I could go move to LA or go and move to New York and work in that industry in a conventional way. And so I was and all of my professors like really loved that I was kind of an agitator and that I questioned everything, but they didn't know what to do with me, like like from a professional standpoint.
Yeah.
And I also kind of went into the program, instead of like, what can this program make me into? I went into the program more like, I'm going to use this program to my own, like, I'm going to form my own thing, Like, they didn't have a documentary film, like, course load, but I was, like, determined I was going to use this program to make me into a good documentary filmmaker. And so, like, my professors loved me, Like, I was a good student. I was really engaged, but they didn't know how to guide me in the real world, really. They didn't really know, like, amazing professors, but just didn't really know how to do that. So
Because you didn't fit in that cookie cutter mold.
yeah. And Syracuse is a pretty commercial school. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it's the choice that I made. And so I think they were more commercial, like they were more used to people going to get them, to get a job, rather than to question the whole like system, like
Yeah.
like system buster type students.
Go down that path and don't ask questions.
Yeah. So anyways, so meanwhile, in between years at school, I was working on an organic farm, because pretty much like with my anxiety, and I really think of like the anxiety and the depression as basically just like, I was extremely empathic, like really super sensitive, still am, but like, very, very sensitive person. And I just was trying to find like where I fit in the world. You know what I mean? And so what I chose to do in between years at school was to work on an organic vegetable farm. And I know that was a completely practical decision at that point, because I was so drained like at school, because so much of my mental and emotional energy was going toward, system busting, like, and I'm saying this in retrospect. I don't think I was hugely aware of all of that, like as it was happening. But now when I look back, I think I was just putting so much energy into questioning like systems and institutions, including the institution that I was in, and I didn't really have a ton of friends, or like I don't think I had a ton of friends that I could really talk to about that there. So when I came home for summer break, I was like literally totally subconsciously like knew that I needed to have my hands in the earth. Like I needed to literally like unplug completely. And I say this now, but I was not aware of that. I just needed a summer job. And I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to be outside, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that decision transformed my life forever, like working on an organic vegetable farm, because I didn't really have an awareness around the local food movement. Like, I didn't really have a passion for that. And until I started working there, and talk about a weird experience, like in between years at school, because it was an education in and of itself. You know, I went in, I was made fun of like by my friends on the farm because the first day that I started, I was wearing pink rain boots. And like, you know, here are all these amazingly strong women who are like feminists and like, and I was just, I think I came off as kind of the kind of aloof, like, you know, suburban girl
Mm-hmm.
who like did not know what she was getting herself into. And like, I am not built for farming either. Like my body type is just not, I have like no upper body strength at all. So, so I think I honestly came onto that project and people who were working with me were like, who the hell is this girl? And like, what is she here for, you know? And but the people that I met there, like I said, a lot of incredibly strong women, artists, feminists, such strong-willed, um, you know, activists really, and people who are using kind of their lifestyle as a an amazing, I want to say like an amazing, like all of what I was noticing at school, and the veil that was kind of no longer over my eyes. Like I was seeing these women and these people I was working with really living it, like living a truth that um, of like what's behind the curtain. You know what I'm saying? Like what's real, you know? And I was craving that, like what's real, subconsciously so much. And so I was shown I was shown um these amazing, like this amazing lifestyle that was an alternative to what I was witnessing at school, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um and it was a huge reality check. Like it wasn't like easy to relate at first, you know, um, because these were people who were questioning like everything, you know, questioning everything they were consuming, like everything that they were doing, how it was affecting the world, the planet, like everything. Sometimes to an extent where I was just like, all right, we gotta live our lives, you
Yeah.
know, like you gotta like, um, so talk about like kind of both extremes, you know what I mean? Like I felt like at school I was living, I shouldn't say like it was an extreme, but like I was living a certain extreme and having to face a reality of like, okay, what am I going to do after school? Could I go and work in production, a completely controlled environment where like for 12 or 14 hours a day, you're in a studio or whatever, and like you don't see the light of day and you're eating whatever convenient food that you can shove in your face before, you know, the schedule kind of rolls on. And then, you know, seeing the way that these other people that I met on the farm were just like following the natural rhythms and cycles of the sun and the earth, and like the choices they were making in consumption. And what was cool about our farm was that it was it was people of all ages and all backgrounds, and we had two amazing Jamaican guys that turned into my great friends, and we had this amazing Mexican family, and we had, you know, women, you know, amazing women in their 60s and 70s, like other women in their 20s, 30s, 40s, like just like amazing group of people. Um, all different political backgrounds too. You know, you had like very, very liberal people and then like really conservative people, and you're with these people all day. Sometimes like sometimes for like 8 to 9 hours a day in a field, and it's really hot. So like you can only imagine the kinds of conversations that come up. So anyways, I took this experience as a major learning experience for me. And I think when I look back, um, I think it was almost more of a learning experience than my very expensive, you know, higher education was for
Mm-hmm.
me. And it also it wasn't rainbows and butterflies. Like none of it was rainbows and butterflies. I really struggled in school with anxiety, and then on the farm, like I wasn't cut out for it physically, and I was really, but like at least I was grounded and I was in the earth, and I would kind of gain my strength back. My boss used to like make fun of me because he was like, "You look really ill." Like every time I would come back to the farm, he's like, "Wow, like finals were probably like really bad." Because I did. I was like really just not like healthy. I wasn't healthy. And so I would kind of gain my strength and my vitality back. And that's when I started learning about food more, you know? And yeah, so that whole experience really impacted me. And once I got out of school, I really had a hard time deciding what to do, you know? A couple years um, after school, I kind of was going back and forth like, do I want to go to New York and really try documentary filmmaking? Like, and also feeling the need that I really needed to make my education worthwhile and like pay for my student loans. Like, oh man, like I've got to get production work. I've got to get jobs. But I think my spiritual inner knowing, like I couldn't lie to myself. um but I did, and I did work in production locally with some amazing people. You know, it was just my heart wasn't really in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't lie to myself. And I should say though that production in its most um, literal sense, like I know that my education in communications is invaluable. Like I'll always have it, and it's really expanded my like I can use my communication skills like wherever I go, you know, very, very valuable stuff. But I just think that the paths that were set out in front of me, like really none of them felt resonant within me. So I ended up working on farms after school. Like I worked at my old farm, and then like a year or so after that, I moved to the Hudson Valley, and I was working on a farm there, and I worked for a purveyor where we gathered local food, and we went into restaurants down in New York and some really amazing, you know, farm to table restaurants, and did that. And yeah, and I think, you know, so the work that I've done, it's still really I still am a little unclear in terms of my profession. But over the past couple of years, I've really, really put a lot of extra time into my spiritual practice. Like I've really, really focused on, because life kind of just brought me back to my spiritual roots.
Yeah, it comes full circle or full spiral.
I would say full spiral in my case. Yeah, like definitely.
Yeah, because you're at a similar place, but like
Yeah.
it's a spiral out because it's not
Yeah.
exactly the same.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it certainly did, you know, just a lot of different simultaneous life events happening. And I decided to kind of take the time, I decided to take time for myself to really sort out some of my spiritual I guess, baggage, and um, it led me back home, and it led me back kind of in my mom's space. And I apprenticed, basically. I decided that I wanted to apprentice and learn Reiki formally, and go through the 3 levels formally. Um, and and yeah, and so I don't know how much you know about Reiki. Do you know much about Reiki?
Yeah, I'm a Reiki master myself.
You are?
Yeah.
How did I not know that? That's
I don't know.
crazy. So you know kind of the process, like that there's
Yep.
the 3 levels of and the 3rd level is like mastery. So anyway, it was kind of cool. I wanted to share a little story about my Reiki journey because
Please do.
Yes. So so basically, like I said before, my mom's journey, me kind of living, I don't think vicariously is the right way to put it, but like me taking it for granted and her kind of practicing it around me, and kind of like, but me not really taking it on as my own thing. So anyways, I decided, this was actually when I was like 20, so I was still in school. It was when I decided to study Reiki, and so I did level 1, and then, just a couple of years ago I did level 2 and 3. But like when I decided to do level 1, she was kind of pushing it a little bit. She was encouraging me to do it. But like I said, I was like still in that taking it for granted mode. So she had me do this meditation to begin with. And the meditation was meeting your Reiki guide. And I had never done a guided meditation before, so I didn't know what to expect. Like, I was a little nervous. So basically, it's she had me kind of close my eyes and breathe deeply, and like I've always been a major mind chatter person, so I was like really not sure that I was going to be able to focus, or like for her to like bring me down into the levels of relaxation. I was not convinced, but sure enough, like within 30 seconds, like
Wow.
I was deepening, into a pretty amazing thing. So in this guided meditation, you go through, to take you deeper into yourself, you go through, like, you go down a staircase, and then you open a door. Like, what does the door look like? What does the doorknob look like? Open the door. And then, okay, where are you now? Okay, you see a building, and you see another door. Go walk up to the door, and then you open the door. So the whole process, that you're deepening more and more into your like subconscious
journey into self.
You're journeying into yourself. So it was like the first time that I had ever done that. And I was like amazed. I'm like, oh my gosh, is this just my imagination? Like, what is this? But I was really going into it. And so, so finally we get to the final door, and I knew that behind the door I was going to meet my Reiki guide, And I remember like, I was really into the meditation, but I was also kind of like, am I really gonna like see anything? Like I felt like pressure. Like, am I gonna see something? So anyway, I like walked into the room, and it was this massive ballroom, and it was super clear. It was like a massive ballroom with all this reflective glass, and there was like a star ceiling, like a celestial ceiling. And at first I didn't see like any other figures or anything in the room, but then I like looked to my right, and there was a staircase, and there was a figure standing on the staircase. So I approached the figure, and it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. I know that it was not something that I had seen somewhere, and that I was kind of like, from my subconscious,
like
it was like
projecting,
I had never seen anything. It was kind of a humanoid, like upright figure, but it had a cape of feather, like this amazing cape of like white feathers, and then it had the face of like the lower half was like a human face, but like as if it had like white face paint, and then the upper half was like a snow leopard.
Huh.
And I was like, oh my God, I could feel myself like really excited. So then it took its cape and it put it around my shoulders. And it was just like I was there with this being, and there wasn't any speaking, but I mean, probably a little bit of just like it was all feeling, really. And so, um, anyway, so I was there with it, and then, the meditation brought me out of the space, and like, and I came kind of back to myself, and I was sitting with that experience, and I, of course, shared with my mom afterward, and I was just so blown away. It was like my first major guided meditation, and I had seen this like amazing thing. I was completely blown away. And so then, fast forward a couple weeks, my mom had this calendar on her refrigerator, and it was kind of, it was this artist. Her name is Susan Seddon Boulay, and you've probably seen some of her work, but she would paint a lot of these like kind of shamanic figures. And it was time to to turn the calendar, and sure enough, exactly what I saw right on
Whoa.
right on the next month. And not only that, but when I looked down, the year was my birth year that she had painted this figure. So yeah, so it was pretty incredible. That was an amazing kind of point in my spiritual path where I think instead of taking for granted and just like it being more of my mom's path, like I started really taking it on and like understanding on a deeper level, like how profound some of these experiences could be, and for it to be affirmed, because I didn't even really feel like I needed the affirmation because it was so felt, and I really felt it was authentic, but it was really cool for it to be affirmed that way.
Yeah, like that's a definitive sign.
Yeah. Yeah, like you don't get any more definitive than that. So anyways, I'm like bouncing around like crazy with this story, but I feel like that's kind of how
Yeah, I like it though. It's
spiritual
interesting.
journeys are. So yeah, and then in recent years, deciding to take it to another level, like I said, kind of having the spiral, happen, and coming back home and kind of reassessing and having more time to study, to study spirituality and taking things to the next level. And within this very potent couple of years that I've been home and I've been focusing more on my spiritual practice, a major thing that I have invested a lot of time in is the tarot. So, yeah, the tarot has been just an amazing study. It's I don't even know where to begin. Like we were talking a little bit on our drive over here, but I think that one thing that I like to speak of with the tarot is that I think there's a lot of negative connotations with it. And I've been playing around with decks for a long time because, like my mom had several, like probably like 20 decks in our house. And I'd play around and just, never read anything about it, like didn't really know like what to do or whatever, but just kind of very intuitively interacted with the deck. And so anyways, that's kind of the approach that I have with it even now. Like I've done a little bit of study. My dear friend Donna Evlith is an amazing tarot master, and she taught me a lot of like the standard aspects of tarot and kind of how to unpack it as in a very intellectualized sense. But I prefer mostly to work with it in a very intuitive way. Um, so anyway, yeah, I think tarot is just really misunderstood. I see it as a tool, and I think like with anything, anybody can use that tool to whatever, you know, like whatever intention they have behind it, like they can use that tool. So there have been a lot of people kind of like in history, really, not just recently, but just in history, who've used the tarot in kind of irresponsible ways. And but I think basically I see it as a tool of speaking to the subconscious. So what's really interesting is kind of the tarot, and how it relates to my background is that I went to school for filmmaking. So like filmmaking, brought out, it was a creative expression for me, of imagery and symbolism, and I am not a words person. Like words on paper, black and white, like I've never been good at absorbing information through words on paper. I I've always been horrible at retaining information or like researching, um, and that form of language. Whereas if you show me a film, like if you show me a film on any subject matter, I'm going to absorb way more information from audio visual than I
Mm-hmm.
am words. It's just who I
Yeah,
am.
you're a visual learner. That's your
Yeah.
preferred meta model.
Yes, exactly. So I kind of learned that when I was in school. And then now, again, like when I don't think consciously, but subconsciously, I realized at one point that the tarot works in a similar way. Um, so I really like geeking out on the tarot. Um, but yeah, with it, like in film school, you learn about the hero's journey and how
Mm-hmm.
um, every film kind of goes by the hero's journey, or every narrative
Yeah, every
structure.
novel too. That's
Exactly.
something. Yeah, I studied it heavily while I was writing my book Soswick.
Yes, exactly. So, what's fascinating with the tarot is that the tarot is cut up into a couple sections. So you have the major arcana, um, and then you have the minor arcana. So the minor arcana are the four suits, like in a regular deck of cards, and you also have your face cards, and then you have the major arcana, which is called the Fool's Journey. So basically, the Fool is the first card in the major arcana. So the Fool, and I wish we could kind of like show your viewers, but I'll just describe it. So like the Fool in the card is, he has a sack over his shoulder, and he's about to walk off of a cliff, and he has his head in the clouds. And kind of what he symbolizes is naivety, like complete 100% naivety, like no life experience whatsoever, but that there's also like benefit to having like no life experience. You're kind
Yeah,
of like carefree.
open, taking risks, all that.
Exactly, like blank slate,
Yeah, no preconceived notions, no limiting beliefs, all that.
Right. So as you move your way through the major arcana, it's relatively similar to the hero's journey, but it's a little different. Um, so like I'll go through the first couple cards. So like on the first card he meets is the magician. So you have the magician, who on his table he has all four of the suits. So he has the sword, he has the wand, he has the pentacle, and he has the chalice. So basically what the magician does is he takes the sack from, the sack from the Fool, and he lays out what's in his sack. Okay, you have these four things. And those four things are the suits in the minor arcana. So the chalice is or the cup is water, and the wand is fire, the fire element, and the sword is the air element, and the pentacle is the earth element. So basically, what the magician is doing is he's showing the fool, look at all these gifts that you have. So he's showing him basically his potential.
Mm-hmm.
He's showing him his potential, but he's not showing him how to use it. And so then the fool moves on to the high priestess, and she's sitting, at her on her throne with her amazing crown of Isis, and she has these two pillars and this sheet of pomegranates behind her. And so basically, her lesson to the fool is go inward and find your vision of what you want to use these tools for. Every person has to have a vision before they make something happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he is encouraged to go inward and find his vision, and really, like, she's all about very, like, visionary energy. And then he moves on to the Empress. And so the Empress is this amazing, voluptuous kind of queen sitting on her throne, and she's got fruit all over the place. She's very fertile. And her lesson is you have to nurture and nourish your dream. You can't just, you have to nourish it, and you have to see it through.
Yeah. Water the seed.
Feed it. Exactly, water the seed. And so then the Emperor is the next one that the fool moves on to, and his whole thing is once you have your dream and you're nurturing it, you have to be able to build a stable foundation. You have to be able to safeguard it. You have to, be able to protect it and build a stable foundation. So et cetera, et cetera. So there's 21 or 22 major arcana cards, and the final one is Ascension. It's the World card. So it's kind of like this ascension vibration of, like, ascending from the earthly woes or whatever. So, and each of the suits are also loaded with information. The minor arcana is, like, loaded with information as well. You have numerology, you have colors, you have symbolism, and so there are so many interpretations with the tarot, and I think the best way is to, like, learn the basics of kind of what I just talked about, like, kind of learn the basics of the craft, but to spend the majority of your time, like 75% of your time, really interacting with the cards and feeling your way through the meaning of each of them and your relationship with them, because it is the language of the subconscious, and it's our way of accessing the subconscious mind and our own inner knowing and intuition. So one major thing that I kind of just want to put out there, I was telling Steve earlier, is that, the tarot, I think that it's been misused by certain people in that, psychics kind of use it to help read people's futures. And I think it gets into a little bit of, like, a slippery slope kind of situation, because I think by someone approaching, and I'm guilty of it because I've gotten a ton of readings myself by other people, so I'm guilty of it. But what happens is you go to get a reading from someone else, and you're basically putting your power into somebody else's hands and saying, what is my future looking like? Like, what is going to happen to me? Is this the person I'm supposed to be with? Is this the job that I'm supposed to take? What is this going to look like 6 months down the road? And, I have mixed feelings about it, because I also have friends who are amazing psychics. I have really amazing psychic friends and people who are amazing intuitives who I trust dearly, to kind of support me and give me information if I feel like I need a little something or an affirmation or something. But I think oftentimes people go into situations where they're going to get a reading and they don't know the other person. They're feeling super vulnerable. They're usually at this pivotal moment in their life where they don't know which way to go. So I think it's really easy to be very vulnerable and to be taken advantage of
Mm-hmm.
very easily. And I think that it's happening all the time. I think with tarot as well as like psychics in general, because there's all sorts of types of divination. You know, you have like runes and you have tarot and you have, like other types of decks that aren't necessarily tarot associated, like more intuitive reads. So you have all these types of people that are channeling their gifts kind of in different ways. And I just think that it's really easy to get taken advantage of. And I think, so I've kind of had a little bit of a challenging time trying to carve out my identity as a reader, or an intuitive using the tarot, because I don't want people giving their power over to me.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope, and I want to get into that
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it with giving power away,
Mm,
you're basically giving that person your free will too. So you're casting your free will aside,
yeah,
and that is a slippery slope too. And like, there's a lot of like karmic things associated with interfering with people's free will as well.
exactly. Yeah,
And like, that's just not the thing to do, because ultimately we want people to be free and empowered. So
exactly.
I think a balance, and I think you're hinting at this, is to
Yeah,
give people insight, and then from there they have the power to choose, instead of saying this is
yeah,
what your future is, and they're basically relegated to that path because they've given their power away. But like, here's some insight, do
yep,
with it what you want, because you're the one who's empowered.
exactly. Yeah. And the way that I do a reading really is I've been playing around with it a little bit, but I have been encouraging people to look at the cards and ask them. I kind of call myself a tarot guide, in that it's
I
like
like that.
kind of like ask them what they see in it. And and also because I use the tarot for my own kind of intuitive gifts, like it kind of pulls out of me when I see the cards, it pulls out of me some of my own intuitive impulses.
It makes it tangible, and since you're visual, that's like
Exactly.
a really cool way of doing it.
Yeah. And so basically I will assist people, like if I see something in the cards, I will say, but it's never about the future. It's usually about like if I see something, it's like this seems like a this seems like a factor that might be blocking you, or like is there, it's always about like how do we clear certain blocks and make things easier for you to move forward in the way that you want to go. You know what I mean? And I never, like, I really really try to, watch myself to never read the future, because I don't read the future. Like, that's part of my thing too, is that, I'm not a psychic. Like, I'm developing my intuitive abilities and my psychic abilities. That's the other really funny thing. Is that a lot of people think psychic abilities are this like gift that you just get like as a
Everyone has
child.
psychic abilities.
But it's like anything. It's like any athletic ability or anything. Like, you have to work at it. You have to have completely 100% pure intentions. Like, or else you're really going to get yourself into a mess. I think,
Yeah,
like,
it creates a web.
it creates a
Basically,
web. You
a
have
web
to
of
be
cords.
very responsible.
Yeah.
Not everybody is, but you have to be very responsible. So it's been a learning process for me, and I think with the tarot, it's like it's an incredible tool, and I think it's just really good for people who are very visual, and I'm really trying to use it as a way to get people to connect to their inner intuitive impulses and our subconscious, because I believe that each of us knows the answer to any question that we might have about ourselves. Like, you have feelings, you have pulls, you're drawn to certain things and you resist other things. And it's like, if you resist it, that doesn't mean that it's not meant for you. Sometimes you have to go deeper into that. So really, you have to, if you don't feel comfortable navigating these waters by yourself, you have to have a super, like, someone with a ton of integrity to help you navigate these waters. Like, I think and you probably know, like, as a spiritual teacher, it's like you have to really walk the walk. Like, you can't just talk the talk. Like, you have to do a lot of your own inner work. And so right now, it's like where I am at with my business or my services with both Reiki and tarot. It's one of those things that it's shifting and evolving all the time, and I have to take breaks sometimes where, like, if I'm not really available on, or like if my boundaries aren't really great that day, like where I'm like not feeling super strong, it's like I'm not going to do readings for people, or I'm not going to I'm not going to give services.
Yeah,
You know
not
what I'm
gonna
saying?
force it.
Yeah, and just you have to have that level of integrity. Because you have to just you have to be clear, to work with other people. You really have to be clear, and you have to hold space. You have to be able to hold space for other people, because I don't think I realized, once I decided to start doing this kind of work, I didn't really fully realize how vulnerable the people who come for this kind of work are. Like, these people are usually, I'm not saying everyone, but a lot of people, it's like maybe they're coming for like a medical issue where like they're super discouraged with, like, or disillusioned. There's a lot of disillusioned
Yep.
energy where it's like maybe they've gotten opinions from other people, professionals, and, like they're just really at their last straw, or they need hope. I should say they're looking for hope. They're looking for something to hold on to. Like, so you have to just have tremendous integrity. You have to assure people, like, that 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 they need to follow their intuition with what they need to do for themselves. Like, you cannot have much of an ego, like, in this kind of work, or you at least need to know how to put your ego hat away and just not bring that into this kind of practice, and not think that you can, you know, that you can predict someone's future just to make them feel good in that one moment. Like, it's just really, it can be really convoluted and get really complicated really fast. So I just think, so that's why I like to use it as a tool, like I said before, of just teaching people how to use it, for themselves, put the power back in their hands. And it was really cool because when I decided I was going to start doing tarot more and offering reads in a more public way rather than just with family and friends, I downloaded my guides. Actually, like, I use the term downloaded, but it was pretty much through meditation. I got spreads that were really divinely guided, because in tarot, like, you not only have your cards, but you have the geometry of the spread that you lay the cards out in. And it was so funny because I'm looking through these books. And again, like, that whole, I'm much more of a feeler. Like, I'm not as much of a template, like, textbook.
This is the system you have to use.
Yeah. So, like, none of the spreads were resonating. And I was like, I can't read cards based on somebody else's spread. Like, I have to develop my own.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a creative endeavor. It's like, how do the a creative expression, like, how do the cards relate to one another? So I went into meditation, and I was really feeling like, okay, I want to have the purest intention. I really want to organize these cards in the best way possible. So I ended up it was around the eclipse, the solar eclipse in August, was it? Or July?
August.
Yeah, of 2017. And and I went into meditation, and I was given a geometry of an inverted tetrahedron, and then an upright tetrahedron, which are pyramids. That's the tetrahedron shape. And the two tetrahedrons were converging onto one another, but not fully like the Merkaba, which is the full integration of two tetrahedrons, but just the apexes of the two tetrahedrons, and it was forming a diamond. Does that make sense? So it's like they were coming onto one another, and then like there was like a diamond shape. And so the geometry, what came to me through that meditation was that, okay, it's the whole like as above, so below. We have our soul selves, which is the inverted tetrahedron, and then we have our earthly selves and our earthly lives, and then that diamond in the center is our heart consciousness version of self. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
it's
it was
almost like the connecting point then.
Yeah, it was like the connecting point, and like, okay, like how can we live from a place where we're living from that heart conscious place where we're integrating our higher aspects and our earthly aspects, and we're living in this optimum kind of reality, heart-centered space. And so that geometry came to me, and then I kind of developed this this spread that's literally like that geometry. And what I have people do is I have them choose. I actually have them go through the deck and choose like what is a card depiction of what you feel like when you are the heart conscious version of yourself. Like I want you to choose like when you feel like you are the truest version of yourself, what does that look like in the cards? And I have them put that at the center. And have them put that at the center of the spread. And then we shuffle, and I kind of lay out the rest of the spread, and it gives actual like the rest of the spread. So the lower triangle or tetrahedron is kind of like the earthly aspects, our karmic stuff we're here to learn, like our lessons we're here to learn. And then so that's the base of that. And then the second tier is actionable things you can do to kind of clear some of that stuff so that you can be more in your center, which is the apex. And then the top triangle and the cards on the top of the triangle are like your soul aspects, like who you are at your core, but on a soul level. And then the tier below that is like, what are the actionable things I can do in my life to bring more of that in? So it's like, what can I clear from my earthly aspects? What can I like bring in more of my higher aspects so that I can live this truth? And what I love about that spread is that center card, the person chose that, you know, like because they know who they are and what they want to exude into the world. Like, what's the truest part of your nature? Like, who are you? You know who you are, you know? And how can we get there? Like, what can we do to get there, you know? So it's nothing about reading the future. It's nothing about, because really the message that I got in that meditation was like, we don't want anybody asking anything superficial. Like, is this person the right person for me? Because if you're living in your heart-centered consciousness and you know how to like live in your heart-centered consciousness, like you're going to know the answer.
You just trust. Yeah.
You're going to know the answer to that.
Yeah.
So so that's kind of how I'm using the tarot, and it's such a work in progress, you know.
I like that a lot though, because it's like it's integrating someone's intuition, helping them tune into their own intuition, but also like creativity in terms of like creatively working through something, and also incorporating imagination in there with the visual aspects of the cards. And it's like creative solutions with imagination and intuition fused together. Exactly. That's beautiful. I really like that.
Yeah, so again, it's a work in progress. It's only been a couple months. Um, and so, just continuing to be present with it and to honor kind of, yeah, just honor and make sure that I have the most integrity as I can, because we're all just works in progress, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
And yeah, never stops.
Yeah.
It's continuous. And speaking of never stopping, I think we just got into a time vortex.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
definitely been like an hour.
Wow. That's incredible. That went so fast.
Yeah.
It's hard to summarize it all into, you know what I mean? It's hard to kind of,
Yeah.
um,
Well, what would you want people to leave with
to
out of
leave
this
with.
conversation?
Don't give your power over to other people in your own spiritual path. I don't think there's anything wrong with needing guidance or needing affirmation. Like, I myself have been in times in my life where I've been in darkness, where
Mm-hmm.
I've needed like a little bit of trusted guidance, like and to bounce ideas off of someone on a spiritual level, and for them to go inward internally and intuitively, and then kind of, affirm what it is I need to know. But only do that with the most trusted people,
Yeah.
if you have to. And yeah, just stop giving your power away. That's what I would say. Or how can we twist that into a positive rather than a negative? Be
Be
empowered.
empowered.
Be
That's it. Yeah,
empowered
that's
on your
simple.
spiritual path.
Yeah, that's simple, and I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And where could people find you? On the internet, in person, wherever?
Yeah. So on Facebook, my business page is called Deep Dive Healing and Tarot. And the and is a little plus sign.
Cool. I'll link to it in the show
Yeah.
notes.
Cool. And then on Instagram, it's at Deep Dive with Dre.
Nice.
So, yeah, get in touch. I'd love to connect with anybody who's interested in a reading or just wants to talk about what we talked about today.
Yeah. If you're listening, if you're watching, go find her.
Cool. Thanks so much, Steve, for having me.
Yeah.
This was so fun. It flew by.
Yeah,
Oh my
thank you
gosh.
too. Yeah, that was definitely like a conversation vortex.